time travel is always discussed in two directions, the future and the past. While going back in time is still only hypothetical and unproven, time travel into the future has already been demonstrated by physics on very small scales through Albert Einstein's theory of relativity. This showed that time is not absolute, it moves differently for observers depending on their speed. While an object moves close to the speed of light, its passage of time slows relative to an observer at rest, which is called time dilation. This means that the faster you travel, the slower you age relative to someone who is stationary. Einstein's general relativity extended the idea to also include gravity. Time is affected by the strength of gravity, as clocks in a stronger gravitational field tick more slowly, which is called gravitational time dilation. For example, a clock on Earth would actually tick slower than one over in deep space. Astronauts on the International Space Station actually age slightly slower than people on Earth because of their speed, but they also experience less gravity, so the results kind of cancel each other out. These astronauts are often travelling at around 28,000 kilometers per hour, and once returning to Earth, they would have aged about 0.01 seconds less than people on the ground after 6 months. Over an entire lifetime, this would actually accumulate to milliseconds of technically time travelling into the future. However, backwards time travel is far more problematic. Closed time-like curves appear as mathematical solutions to Einstein's equations, such as wormholes or rotating universes. These tend to raise paradoxes, like going back and preventing your own existence. There has been no experimental evidence to suggest that travelling back in time is possible, and most physicists believe that it isn't, but that hasn't stopped the stories and claims over the years. Welcome to Seeking Answers, and this is 14 alleged claims of genuine time travel. It's also come to my attention that over 90% of our viewers aren't subscribed, so please make sure that you click subscribe, and only 14% of them have notifications switched on. So make sure you click that bell to be notified for every video that comes out every single Sunday at 3 o'clock UK time. It was in October 2010 when George Clark posted a video on his YouTube channel entitled Chaplin's Time Traveller. This included some bonus material from the DVD of the popular 1928 Charlie Chaplin film, The Circus. It included some footage of the movie's premiere in Los Angeles at Grauman's Chinese Theatre. And there's a few seconds which involves a woman walking by holding an object to her ear as if she is talking into a thin black device, such as a mobile phone, which wouldn't be invented for several decades. This find quickly gained millions of views and mainstream media attention. While most on the internet were blown away by this discovery, editor for The Atlantic, Nicholas Jackson, was convinced that it was nothing more than a portable hearing aid, which was only just being developed at the time. A theory backed up by New York Daily News writer Michael Sheridan, who believed that it could have been an acousticon, manufactured by Miller Reese Hutchison. Though others have argued that if it was a hearing aid, why would she be talking into it herself? Though others believe she may have been calling out to the person that overtook her. Well, others have argued that if she really was a time traveller, how could she even be using her mobile phone in 1928 when there would have been no reception and no way to even communicate with other people to begin with? Furthermore, why dress in the appropriate clothing for the time period but then blow your cover by using a device that was yet to be invented? Phil Skroska, an archivist at the Bernard Becker Medical Library of Washington University School of Medicine, believed that it was nothing more than a rectangular ear trumpet. Quote, "As you can tell from these, old-fashioned mechanical or resonating hearing aids were not necessarily long and rounded. Short, compact, rectangular forms were not unusual." End quote. Strangely, YouTuber PlanetCheck actually claimed that this woman was their great-grandmother and confessed that it truly was a mobile phone, a wireless one, developed by industrial giant DuPont in their factory over in Massachusetts. Some have theorized that the woman was innocently shielding her eyes from the sun and possibly talking to herself or even readjusting her hat, but it officially remains unsolved. In 1941, a photograph was taken of the reopening of the South Fork Bridge in British Columbia, which went viral online as it portrayed a man wearing what appeared to be modern-day clothing and sunglasses, carrying a small camera. This photograph was examined by experts who confirmed that it was completely authentic, though others have argued that although he looks different to everyone else around him in the picture, he doesn't actually look too out of the ordinary for 1941. The sunglasses that he's wearing were actually a style first founded in around the 1920s. And though he appeared to have been wearing a printed t-shirt, on closer inspection, it was possibly a sweater with a sewn-on emblem. It was considered to have been a sports team similar to the local ice hockey team, the Montreal Maroons. The rest of his attire were actually available back then, and although on first glance the camera may have been a lot smaller than other models around the time, they were around. Even Kodak themselves had been manufacturing portable cameras similar to the one in the photograph as early as 1938. Just 2 years later, and another photograph, also proven to have been genuine, was taken at Newquay, Cornwall on Towan Beach. This was posted decades later to social media by Stuart Humphreys, who himself was convinced that this was nothing more than the image of someone rolling a cigarette. Others believed he was checking his pocket watch, but the rest of the internet were convinced that he was operating a mobile phone, which once again went to the news and press, but most found it more suspicious that he was wearing a suit on the beach instead. Then again, others are dressed for the winter while others are ready for summer, so none of the holiday goers were actually very consistent in this. In 1951, a man appeared quite literally out of thin air in New York City's Times Square wearing 19th century clothing, appearing lost, around 30 years of age, before being fatally struck by a car. In his pockets he had a copper token for a beer worth just 5 cents, but nobody could recognise the name of the bar and it wasn't listed in any of the city's address books. He also held $70 in old banknotes that hadn't been used in decades. Discovered was a bill for the care of a horse and the washing of a carriage, but the stable couldn't be located either. He held a business card featuring his name as well as an address at 5th Avenue and a letter sent to him back in 1876 by the name of Rudolph Fentz. Strangely, none of these items or even the man himself seem to have aged, despite them all supposedly being around 80 years old. The authorities investigated the address, but the owner had never even heard of Rudolph Fentz. His name wasn't in the address book, and his fingerprints weren't on file either. He didn't match any missing person report, but eventually investigators did find a Rudolph Fentz Jr. in an old phone book from 1939, 12 years earlier. Residents remembered Fentz and described him as being in his 60s, but claimed that he had moved away in 1940. Upon further investigation, they discovered his bank account, and it turned out that Fentz Jr. had died 5 years earlier, but his wife was still alive and living in Florida. Upon contact, she admitted that her husband's father, Rudolph Fentz Sr., disappeared when he was just 29 during an evening walk in Times Square. This led to them discovering reports about the disappearance of Rudolph Fentz from 1876, and all reports of his appearance matched the man that they had found. However, this story was merely an urban legend that had been passed around online forums for years, falsely being presented as factual. In actuality, the story stemmed from the sci-fi books A Voice from the Gallery by Ralph M. Holland, as well as the 1951 short story I'm Scared by Jack Finney. Really sorry to burst all of your bubble, but this one didn't actually happen. During the 1962 celebration of Brazil winning the World Cup against Czechoslovakia, a photograph was snapped, but what some found bizarre is at the bottom centre of the frame, with what appears to be someone taking a picture from what looks like a 21st century flip phone. Some even speculating that the celebrating Brazilian footballer Mauro Ramos appears to be looking directly at it in confusion, though others have refuted this claim, stating that the person is clearly holding a box camera and not a mobile phone, though due to the angle and the fact that they are holding it with just one hand, it does resemble the latter. In 1995, Art Bell's radio show Coast to Coast AM received a call from a Mike Marcum, who claimed to have been an electrical engineer who had discovered the answer to time travel using a Jacob's ladder, opening a temporal vortex. He wanted to build a larger version of the machine, so he even admitted to stealing several power transformers from a local company called St. Joseph Light and Power in King City, Missouri. This was actually confirmed, as the theft led to a blackout and he was arrested and spent 60 days in prison as well as a suspended sentence. A year later, he called the radio show again and insisted that he was now legally acquiring parts to build a second time machine and was only 30 days away from finishing it. He claimed to have sent 200 items as well as several young animals through, and he planned to going through the machine himself before mysteriously vanishing in 1997. It wasn't until 2015 when he re-emerged in another interview with Art Bell on his show Midnight in the Desert. He claimed to have sent himself 2 years into the future, but he arrived 800 miles away in Fairfield, Ohio, and suffered from amnesia during the trip. His story continued that he then spent his time in a homeless shelter before his memories started to slowly return. However, the Missouri State Highway Patrol has no records of him ever being reported as a missing person, so this is another one that is most likely bogus. Around the beginning of the 21st century, a man by the name of John Titor joined an online forum claiming to be a time-travelling soldier from 2036, sent back on a military mission to visit his family and recover photos that were lost during the devastating civil war that supposedly was going to take place in the United States in 2008. He claimed that time travel paradoxes are actually impossible, so everything that happened in his timeline was also going to take place in ours, such as a short World War III in 2015 wiping out 3 billion people. He allegedly invited others to see photos of his time machine, claiming that it was a, quote, stationary mass temporal displacement unit powered by 2 top-spin dual positive singularities, end quote. This man mysteriously disappeared not long after, but considering his predictions never actually took place, his credibility, popularity, and reputation faded away with him, with some believing that it was a hoax created by 2 siblings in Florida. The John Titor case was then attempted to be repeated by someone either called Bob White or Tim Jones, depending on the account, who began sending spam emails claiming to have been an individual looking to find someone who could supply a dimensional warp generator. In some of these emails, he claimed to have been a time traveller who was stuck in 2003, while others claim he was seeking parts from other time travellers, some of which actually received responses from people offering him the parts that he needed. A man by the name of Dave Hill actually set up an online shop where they could buy a warp generator, which was actually just a hard drive motor, while others tried to sell the emailer time travel courses before they could offer him what he needed. It turned out the emails were sent from Robert J. Todino, but he was genuinely under the belief that he could legitimately time travel and believed that he was perfectly mentally stable. Though his father was concerned that people replying to his emails and entertaining this notion were only feeding his psychological issues and delusions, especially as he was previously diagnosed with dissociative disorder and schizophrenia. It was in March 2003 when Andrew Solson was arrested for several SEC violations after he supposedly placed 126 high-risk stock trades and won every single one. Supposedly, he initially invested $800 and ended up winning over $350 million, leading to suspicion and his arrest. This led to a 4-hour confession from him claiming to have been a time traveller from 200 years into the future. He even offered to tell investigators the whereabouts of Osama bin Laden as well as the cure for AIDS in return for a lesser punishment and to be allowed to return to his time machine. However, this wasn't agreed as he refused to tell them the whereabouts of the time machine itself or how time travel works. But my point is more, wouldn't you just entertain it just to see? You know, tell us where Osama is, then you check and he's there. Oh, okay. An unknown man posted his bail and he was scheduled for a court hearing, but strangely he disappeared and was never seen again. And furthermore, there are no records of him ever existing in the first place. However, this may be another fictional piece that was circulated over the internet, possibly from Weekly World News, which was a satirical newspaper, but it was spread across papers, internet forums, emails and Yahoo News as if it was a fact, but once again, it was most likely completely fictional. In 2006, another video was uploaded of a Swedish man named Håkan Nordkvist, who claimed to have been accidentally sent forward in time to 2046, where he met his 70-year-old future self. He admitted to having a great time together, showing footage of them smiling and hugging each other, and even providing evidence of them both having the same tattoo in the same location. However, this was exposed as being nothing more than a marketing campaign to promote pension plans of the insurance company AMF. What a letdown. Some have even speculated that an 1860 painting, The Expected One, by Austrian Ferdinand Georg Waldmüller shows a woman staring down at a mobile phone, walking through some countryside, though others have argued that it's a prayer book. It'd be a very random painting of someone just walking through being on their phone in 1860. Italian Benedictine monk Pellegrino Ernetti claimed to have used a time viewer, which allows him to film the past without any sound using what he called a chronovisor, providing photos of ancient Rome as well as the crucifixion of Christ, though the latter turned out to be a reverse photo from a postcard, and he would later, towards the end of his life, retract his claims entirely. A lot of these stories are very disappointing. The Philadelphia experiment was a name given to a naval military experiment supposedly taken out on October the 28th, 1943. The story is that the US Navy destroyer USS Eldridge was to be rendered invisible or cloaked to enemy devices, which some called Project Rainbow. Though it's been speculated that they actually time travelled back 10 seconds, some have said that it was actually more. However, most consider this story to be a complete hoax. The US Navy themselves maintain that this experiment never actually took place, and the story even contradicts well-established facts about the Eldridge as well as the laws of physics. Another story takes place on July the 2nd, 1955, following a Pan Am Douglas DC-4 that carried 57 passengers and 5 crew members, completely disappearing in mid-air on a flight from New York City to Miami, Florida. Strangely, the plane then reappeared 37 years later near Caracas in Venezuela, landing not long after. The story goes the airlines tried to communicate, but the pilot replied, quote, "We just need to arrive in Miami in 9:55. End quote, before taking off again and successfully doing so. However, this was another story that stemmed from a 1975 article of Weekly World News and was spread across the internet over the years as factual. There are no records of this flight ever taking place. Time travel into the future has already been demonstrated through relativity, with atomic clocks, GPS satellites and astronauts aging slightly less than people on Earth. By travelling near light speed or near a black hole, a human could potentially jump thousands or millions of years into Earth's future. But time travel into the past remains purely theoretical and may be entirely impossible. So until proven otherwise, we can merely speculate and continue seeking answers. So until proven otherwise, we can merely speculate and continue waiting for the plane to pass by.